What's up everyone, welcome to today's video, welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel, thank you very much for tuning in. I have an argument today. I think Gotham Knights should have a follow-up game, and I think this follow-up game should dial into the systems and mechanics that were in Gotham Knights, expand upon them, and serve them to the right audience. Now, this game does not have to be a Gotham Knights sequel. It could be a game that follows up their worlds that they were already building with different characters, but I think the game needs to possibly go on and market itself to the audience that it's intended for and will appreciate it, because apparently it seems the majority of the fan base, maybe the Arkham fan base or some superhero fans, don't necessarily like this kind of game. And I think the developers played into the hand of trying to maybe appeal to this audience, and it backfired on them. I think this audience, possibly Warner Brothers Montreal, needs to probably ignore them and move on to another set of audience members that will be able to appreciate a game like this. Now, this may sound harsh, it may sound crazy, but at the end of the day, you'll see a lot of different reasons as to why I say this. Now, I'll provide my reasoning, and you judge in the comment section if I'm going crazy or if I have a point to make. So a comment came up in one of my videos. This video has been taken down because I actually accidentally published it. It wasn't supposed to see the light of day. But this person was talking in context of, what they were expecting from Gotham Knights. There's context to this, but I'll read the last part of their statement because that's where something struck me out of. This person writes and says, "I'm not saying people can't or shouldn't enjoy Gotham Knights. I'm just saying the majority of people saw these characters and setting and expected them to behave and play a certain way specific to them. Instead, we got a generic looter where you can apply poison to non-lethal piercing guns for Red Hood, ice sticks for Nightwing, fire staff for Robin, etc. The majority didn't want these systems in this game, and same with Suicide Squad. And then they said the games designed by these publishers need to go away so devs like Rocksteady can actually make or continue to make unique games that put them on the map in the first place." So first of all, that video is about Gotham Knights, so I guess they probably have a problem with Rocksteady, Suicide Squad. That's an entirely different video. But I counter that and say, superhero games have not necessarily enjoyed a lot of RPG-esque versions of them or iterations. So Gotham Knights needs and has room to exist. That's number one. Number two, a game that actually did shake the market and brought a lot of reactions like this was Tom Clancy's The Division 1 and even The Division 2. And in The Division 2 or 1, you can play most parts of the game without even using your gun. And it's actually an RPG third-person shooter. In fact, this is my footage from playing this evening where I'm using burn and bleed elements and my sidearm. I've deactivated other ammo types just so that I can just, chip out enemy health. But for the most part, you can play aspects of the game, destroy and demolish a bunch of enemies by actually using fire guns and bleed weapons or bleed contraptions. I mean, like just this person said, like it's some kind of a big, huge misnomer to not necessarily have seen elements like that in the game. So these systems are allowed to exist in an RPG. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, the fact that Gotham Knights was able to implement them in what I think, in my opinion, was a fun and exciting way is a huge commendable aspect to the developers for pulling it off in a superhero game. The problem, nonetheless, is the community of gamers that kind of saw this game and thought it was their game, in a sense, could not resonate with it, which is where I think there was kind of a shift or, in a sense, a disconnect, because I think the developers should have really been much stronger in their marketing, like saying things like, "Hey, man, this is an RPG. This is what this game is going to look and play like. We would love for these systems to actually be a thing," and make sure that they separated themselves drastically, even much more stronger from the Arkham games, like, than they actually did when they were revealing their game. Now, this person is saying that, these games need to be made. These games that put Rocksteady on the map and so on and so forth need to be made. But here's the problem. If they had gone ahead to make another Arkham-esque style game or a game that runs and plays like Spider-Man, they would have gotten the feedback that they got years ago when they made Arkham Origins. What's interesting is I found an IGN review for Arkham Origins that was written back in the day, and here's the verdict. It says, "Batman games are like pizza. Even when they're not very good, they're still pretty good. Next to Arkham City, Arkham Origins is a bit of a disappointment in its lack of new ideas and use of win buttons, making it the least interesting of the trilogy." What? But an excuse is to dive back into the excellent free-flowing combat and Predator takes down. The story isn't bad. So basically, this is not an original game. So the feedback that was given to Warner Brothers Games Montreal years ago, seemingly it seems like they actually responded to the feedback, because I'm certain that IGN was not the only one who thought of this, and they decided, let's go a different way. Let's get some new ideas going in here. and they got the new ideas going in, and now even fans don't even seem to want to get into these new ideas because they just want that so good old juicy, free flow combat system. So it seems like, for the most part, developers in this day and age cannot necessarily win if they decide to take things a whole different level, which is why I think in their next game, they need to go ahead and just continue to iterate and now market to the audience that they're actually trying to play towards. Firaxis did this with their Midnight Suns game, and they were unapologetic about the fact that it is a turn-based game. Yes, they tweaked some mechanics to kind of make it a little bit more user-friendly, allow for more people to be able to get into the ecosystem and so on and so forth. But by and large, I think they did a good job to still trap their core audiences in that regard and still see if they could bring people who are kind of new to the genre into it. So Gotham Knights, or the developers of Warner Bros. Montreal, if they're making another RPG, they need to find an RPG fan base that's going to appreciate their game, because it appears to me that the Arkham fan base is still stuck in Arkham. There was even another video that I made more recently where somebody was talking about how removing the counter system from this game was dropping the ball. That's not necessarily the case. You can't always have the same combat actually roll into the game. If anything, what you're asking for is an entirely different game, which had already kind of been made and, for the most part, kind of been ignored by many audiences. So if you really want a game like this, I think if people really do want a unique, Batman experience, maybe they ought to be filing their, grievances or their concerns or their desires or their wants with the studio that's been commissioned to make a shooter. I mean, there's no bad or ill will in this. This is just a matter of observing that, man, it appeared to me that the developers at Warner Bros. Games Montreal, they made a decent game, but just marketed it to the audience that, in my opinion, was not ready for anything like this. So this is what I think they're actually good at. They've created these core systems. They've created a lot of this stuff. And I strongly believe that they need to go ahead and market it to the audience that would definitely appreciate this. Because by and large, even if this audience is small, I don't think it necessarily matters. You see, first of all, we know that we have a big issue for the most part whenever games are trying to be made and are trying to be, in a sense, appealing to a lot more people. We're not going to get a lot of creativity whenever we go ahead and follow that particular paradigm. I mean, look at Elden Ring and look at the Dark Souls games. They started out by appealing to small audiences before eventually growing to something big and something unique in a sense. And eventually, once they got successful and were able to nail down a formula that could bring more people in, Elden Ring was born out of that. But initially, that was not always the case. If you go back and look at their first Demon Souls games and even their Dark Souls games and even look at their Sekiro game, it didn't necessarily seem to resonate with a lot of people. It took a lot of iterations, a lot of tries. And yes, they have a hand up on Gotham Knights, like 20 hands up in terms of art and presentation. I get that. But Rome was not built in a day. And this is usually what I usually come out with whenever I end these videos. And so I think this is not necessarily a matter of, say, a lot of these audiences, because even in this, particular encounter, this audience member kind of accused me of maybe wanting to talk about them not necessarily knowing how to play these games or being condescending. I don't think that's my case with people that I talk to here on the channel about these issues. I don't necessarily go that route. It's reviewers that I kind of go after and kind of call them noobs. I do it because, I'm from the fighting game community. So yeah, sometimes we kind of, we smack talk, but I don't do that mostly with audience members, maybe one or two that kind of like try to grief me. I just kind of dish it back to them. What I'm saying is the appreciation of the game style is just something that seems to have a huge disconnect, where this is just the wrong audience for the game overall. I get it. Maybe there might have been issues, because this person goes on to cite some more issues like, 60 FPS and all of that stuff. But I don't necessarily think that those are the core aspects of the conversation right now. I mean, we do have other games that are not 60 FPS that still came out at the same time as Gotham Knights. They did not get this kind of treatment. So I think this was coming from a much deeper place of not getting our so-called Arkham games, when in reality, the developers are just responding to what it is that they were told years ago for the most part. So I guess this is pretty much my own conversation and, kind of my observation on these matters. Like I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if I'm off, my rockers, or if you actually see something that, maybe might clue you into why this game is in a place where it is right now in terms of, community assessment and so on and so forth. And I guess we can talk in another video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.